Welcome to another episode. This one is about confirmation bias. Now, I wanted to make this one early because confirmation bias has so much to do with everything I put out on YouTube, especially, talking about people who disagree with me for a variety of reasons. It applies to so much in life. I've put quite a bit of thought about this over the years, and I just cannot think of a more self-destructive, self-sabotaging aspect of human nature than yours and mine own confirmation bias. So I'm going to discuss it in detail. This very much has to do with, I'm making this series with challenging some of these YouTube content creator named Turd Flinging Monkey, what he says, but obviously I've put out all kinds of material about anarchism, voluntarism, dealing with courts, judges, lawyers, cops, cop watching, all kinds of discussions, debates, civil discourse type stuff with a variety of people from all over the world. And one thing that they all have in common, including myself, is a propensity for confirmation bias. And it's the most dangerous thing to not be aware of. It will ruin your life. It'll just ruin your life. So I've prepared a few articles. One's from Wikipedia, the other one's from Britannica, and the third one's from Science Daily. So I'm just going to give you the quick formal definition of confirmation bias just to, define our terms and to refamiliarize ourselves with the concept. And then I'm going to go into my unique perspective on it when it comes to applying it. I got to sneeze. Hold on. Ugh. Oh dear God! I sneezed so hard I had a stroke. My face, it's numb. All right, we're back in business. So, confirmation bias is the tendency to search for, interpret, favor, and recall information in a way that affirms one's prior beliefs or hypothesis. This is primarily why human testimony is the least convincing form of evidence, including in courtrooms, right? Confirmation bias is a type of cognitive bias, and there's a whole branch on that. You can familiarize yourself if you'd like. And a systematic error of inductive reasoning. Get familiar with inductive versus deductive reasoning. Inductive, it goes backwards. People display the bias when they gather or remember information selectively, or when they interpret it in a biased way. The effect is stronger for desired outcomes, emotionally charged issues, and for deeply entrenched beliefs. People will quite often use logical fallacies to back up their confirmation bias. Now, before I continue, there's basically two forms of bias, or two ways people use confirmation bias. One is because you want to believe something that you want to be true. And the other is you want to believe that something is definitely false. Alright, so there's a plus and a minus to it, keep in mind. People also tend to interpret ambiguous evidence as supporting their existing position. Biased search, interpretation, and memory have been invoked to explain attitude polarization, which is when a disagreement becomes more extreme even though the different parties are exposed to the same evidence. Belief perseverance, when beliefs persist after the evidence for them is shown to be false. The irrational primacy effect, which is a greater reliance on information encountered early in a series, and illusory correlation, which is when people falsely perceive an association between two events or situations. Lastly, on this page, a series of psychological experiments in the 1960s suggested that people are biased toward confirming their existing beliefs. I mean, I know all this makes sense, but this is the most effective and most concise definitions that we have. So just all start on the same page. Later work reinterpreted these results as a tendency to test ideas in a one-sided way, focusing on one possibility and ignoring alternatives. In certain situations, the tendency can bias people's conclusions. Explanations for the observed biases include wishful thinking and the limited human capacity to process information. Alright, confirmation biases contribute to overconfidence in personal beliefs and can maintain or strengthen beliefs in the face of contrary evidence. Poor decisions due to these biases have been found in political and organizational contexts, and your personal life, and mine. Okay? Things went south, and they didn't have to, because I wasn't aware enough of my own confirmation bias. Confirmation bias kills people. It kills people. It causes planes to crash, like the one you're seeing behind me. It's like flying at night in clouds, and you don't know that your altimeter is broken, and you're about to hit the mountain. Alright? That's the worst possible emergency to be in, is one that you're unaware of anything wrong going on. If you know your altimeter is broken and you know the mountain's coming, you can do something about it. You have a chance to live. It's when you don't know what you don't know that gets deadly. That's just personal philosophy, life choices, going to courtrooms, dealing with government, politics, romantic life, everything is affected by confirmation bias. Alright, so Britannica. Confirmation bias, the tendency to process information by looking for or interpreting information that is consistent with one's existing beliefs. This biased approach to decision making is largely unintentional and often results in ignoring inconsistent information. People are especially likely to process information to support their own beliefs when the issue is highly important or self-relevant. Okay, now, this comes from human nature, and there's a reason for it. There's a reason why we're flawed in this way. Confirmation bias is one example of how humans sometimes process information in an illogical, biased manner. One explanation of why humans are susceptible to confirmation bias is that it is an efficient way to process information. Humans are bombarded with information in the social world and cannot possibly take the time to carefully process each piece of information to form an unbiased conclusion. Human decision-making and information processing is often biased because people are limited to interpreting information from their own viewpoint. People need to process information quickly to protect themselves from harm. It is adaptive to rely on instinct, automatic reflexes that keep humans out of harm's way. And then lastly, Science Daily. Confirmation bias. In psychology and cognitive science, confirmation bias is a tendency to search for or interpret information in a way that confirms one's perceptions, leading to statistical errors. Confirmation bias is a phenomenon wherein decision makers have been shown to actively seek out and assign more weight to evidence that confirms their hypothesis and ignore or underweigh evidence that could disconfirm their hypothesis. As such, it can be thought of as a form of selection bias in collecting evidence. Alright, all that's pretty clear, right? Again, I'm putting out the idea that confirmation bias is the most dangerous aspect of the human condition to the success and contentment of our own personal lives. Alright, and this easily leads to an understanding of why it is so critical that logic and reason be adhered to, valued with superglue. If we don't know the truth of a situation, how can we possibly take the appropriate action to deal with it most effectively? And if those problems are very serious and can cause suffering and even be deadly, that's not good. Okay? We need to know what's going on before we judge what to do about it. And I know this is really broad, but you can isolate so many different components of daily life and situations and apply your use of confirmation bias or your ignorance of confirmation bias that's going on to ignore and know about it. Or your nescience, which is to not know anything about it in the first place. They don't teach logic and reason and confirmation bias type topics in school for a reason. Okay, so if the government's against it, you need to be for it when it comes to critical components of knowledge. If you disagree with something that someone is saying, that they're claiming is critically important, the first thing I would do is to check my own confirmation bias. Am I using logical fallacies? One of the most common ones is people stick to an old idea because they've been doing it for years. They don't want to lose credibility. They don't want to enter some kind of grief cycle because they realize they've invested so much and made so many critical decisions on a faulty narrative or an incorrect conclusion about some situation. And I'm serious when I say sometimes the consequences can be beyond drastic, even traumatic, life-altering. All right? If you come across views in a YouTube channel that you strongly disagree with, either you're capable of stepping outside of your ego and your own confirmation bias, or you're not. For those who are not, stop watching this. This is a waste of time. Many people are not capable of doing it. They are NPCs, non-player characters. They're a computer program, all right? To their own detriment. And their punishment is being themselves, all right? If you are capable of observing your own confirmation bias, then you need to check your assumptions, your use of logical fallacies, what is causing you discomfort. Check the factual evidence made available, okay? Just because you don't want something to be true doesn't mean it's not true. And vice versa, just because you want something to be true doesn't mean it's true. A lot of the controversial views I express on my various YouTube channels, very few responses that counter what I'm saying are capable and thoughtful enough for me to take seriously. One of the biggest ways I can tell if someone has a double versus a triple digit IQ is their ability to objectively step outside of their own bias and assess, to estimate, right, a situation and be free from logical fallacies and confirmation bias. The material that's going to be laid out on this channel is extremely controversial. It's extremely unpopular with most people, but it is absolute of critical importance. The things I'm going to be saying during this channel are it's the most important information I know, that I own. It's the most precious information that I own. And without it, you're not able to defend yourself adequately in this world. You are fucked. You are going to be taken advantage of. You are going to be the sucker in the room, and you are going to be making decisions that are not only less than ideal for you, but could be downright dangerous, downright costly beyond imagination. I'm not trying to be some kind of guru of wisdom here. I'm just saying, as someone who has lived, decades as an adult and had experiences from 5 different time zones of the 6 in the United States and dealt with all kinds of courts and judges and cops and authority of all forms, from matrimony to military and everything in between, I'm telling you, confirmation bias is a killer. It is your worst enemy when it comes to flawed internal thinking. I don't know how much more strongly I can put this, and still I feel it's insanely underestimated, the risk that I'm trying to express to you. Confirmation bias will cause you to make decisions that are not only horrible for you, they're wrong for you, your family, your community, and your country. If you've already invested a lot of time and energy and maybe money into something that is inherently false, and you come across the possibility that, oh my gosh, that could be false, the best thing to do is to reverse course and to always go with what you can conclude through factual, irrefutable evidence is true. It doesn't matter how old you are. If you're 8 years old or 80, confirmation bias will kill you. Confirmation bias allows people to be ruled by tyrannical governments. Confirmation bias leads you to romantically connecting with people who are wrong for you, and for not connecting to people who are right for you. Alright? Confirmation bias will take your money. You won't be making as much as you could. You'll be spending more than you had to. All right? I'm not trying to be a fear monger. I'm just trying to snap some reality into one or two people out there who might be watching who've never heard somebody talk about confirmation bias in this way before. Confirmation bias allows people to do bad things when they didn't start out as bad people. Confirmation bias feeds the insanely drunken egos in the narcissist and the sociopath. Confirmation bias is deadly and dangerous because it's so difficult to 1, perceive, 2, accept, and 3, act on. All right? I've been through all the cults. You know, I exist because of Mormonism. All right, I grew up in Mormonism. Then I got married. Then I went to the military. All right, then I got stuck in the justice system. And at first thought, oh, I'm going to rely on the Constitution. No, it's all garbage. It's not a courtroom. That's not a judge. That's not a lawyer. This is just a bunch of armed men with costumes and labels that have nothing to do with actual justice or freedom. Okay? Your confirmation bias will bite you. Do something about it. Constantly be objectively wondering if you are wrong. Be uncertain. Go against the weaker aspects of your human nature. It's okay to not know, especially the answers to the big questions in life. Who am I? Where did I come from? Where am I going? Is there anything bigger than the earth and humanity? What's out there? Be comfortable with being uncertain. It's okay. It's far better to not know than to think you do and be wrong. It's far, far better to not know than to think you do and be wrong. So when considering if what I'm saying about the government and the military and the justice system and romance and women and marriage and having kids and all of that, if that rubs you the wrong way, you may want to consider if you could be wrong and how that would be possible. If it would be inconvenient for you, if it would be painful for you. All right? Just think about it if you don't much. Especially when considering controversial ideas in this new age of technology we're all struggling with. And do not just yourself, but everyone else a favor. Glue yourself to truth. Let everything else come from that. Let the crumbles fall where they may. And do not allow yourself to be bullied. Do not bend the knee to no one at any time. You do it once, they know you're now capable of doing it again. You make everything harder for the rest of us. Alright. I think I got it almost all out of me. I think that's my video on confirmation bias. Hope you got something out of it. I made it early on because, like I said, I'm going to be saying very controversial things and disagreeing with people, and they're going to immediately dismiss me because of confirmation bias. They won't know it, won't want to look at it, won't want to admit it. They just know that goes against what I've always thought and believed, and that can't be true, therefore you're wrong and I'm right. When they're wrong. And it's of critical importance. We're not talking about the most efficient way to get to work in the morning. We're talking about your life. Your life. Alright. That's it. Be safe out there, man. Froggy out.